Welcome back to Bad Things in History, where sometimes a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. Humans are extremely inventive when trying to find new and efficient ways to kill each other. One of the more cost-effective methods for mass murder happens to be biological warfare. Whether by deadly gas or dangerous microorganisms, governments all over the world have exploited biology to kill. Sometimes the desire to develop these dangerous weapons can lead to questionable decisions. Today we are going to tell you the story of how the British government decided that infecting an island with anthrax was a good idea. Biological warfare. The idea of using toxins and disease to weaken enemies first originated in the ancient world. The warriors of the earliest civilizations didn't understand why it worked, but they did observe that when used correctly, biological weapons could have devastating effects. The earliest known account of this technique being used was recorded in texts from the Hittite Empire. As early as 1500 BCE, the Hittites would identify people who suffered from rabbit fever. They would then drive the infected individuals into enemy lands, thus turning them into weapons. As the residents of nearby settlements became infected, they began to suffer from flu-like symptoms. Most of them would die. In some cases, rabbit fever could kill as much as 60% of those it infected. The Roman Empire was also fond of using biological warfare. Soldiers would purposely dip their swords into excrement or the corpses of other dead soldiers. Sometimes archers would do the same with their arrows. The warriors knew that anyone struck with the contaminated weapons would most likely die from infection a few days later. In 1347, Mongol forces attacked a city in Ukraine. To try and force a surrender, they took the corpses of people who died from bubonic plague. The bodies were then catapulted into the city with the goal of infecting everyone within the walls. Similar techniques would later be used in North America as well. In June 1763, during the French and Indian War, the British were under siege from a group of Native Americans. They gave the natives blankets which had been exposed to smallpox. Nobody is sure how effective the blankets were, but in some cases, smallpox wiped out entire Native American settlements. By 1900, germ theory began to explain how these diseases worked. As research into the nature of deadly infections continued, World War I began. Hoping to achieve a decisive victory, Germany began searching for the best way to use biological weapons. One of the first diseases they tried to exploit was anthrax. This is a very deadly bacteria that normally spreads between livestock animals. The German government tried to figure out how to use it against enemy soldiers. They even deployed the anthrax bacteria against the Russian army in 1916, though it isn't known if the attack worked. Interest in biological weapons peaked again as World War II raged across the planet. Germany began experimenting again, this time focusing mostly on nerve agents. Japan also joined this growing club. It started its own program known as Unit 731, which, in addition to its other horrible experiments, also tried to weaponize anthrax. The United Kingdom had no intention of being left behind. It began its own research into biological warfare in 1916. Although it started as a reaction to Germany, the program would eventually develop its own offensive weapons, and decades later it would inspire a terrorist attack. Porton Down. In 1916, a facility was built near Wiltshire. For those who lived in the area and worked in the laboratories, it was known simply as Porton Down. Officially, the location was named Royal Engineers Experimental Station. Research into biological weapons began during World War I but continued long after hostilities ended. The United Kingdom wanted to ensure it could defend against any attacks from these weapons. Trying to get useful data was difficult. Politically and ethically, testing weapons on British citizens was not feasible. However, India was still under British rule. The scientists at Porton Down realized this could work to their advantage. Starting around 1930, they requested access to 500 Indian soldiers who were servicemen in the British Army. These soldiers were taken to a facility in Rawalpindi, which is part of Pakistan today. The soldiers were marched into a gas chamber. Then they were exposed to various biological agents such as nerve gas. Mustard gas was also deployed against unsuspecting victims. The soldiers suffered severe burns across their bodies. In some cases, victims would be hospitalized and unable to function for weeks. Indian soldiers were not the only ones who became unwitting participants in these experiments. The pool of applicants was eventually expanded to include all soldiers in the empire. At least 20,000 British servicemen were subjected to similar treatment at the Porton Down facilities. The tests continued until the early 1940s. The weapons research performed by the researchers was supposed to be defensive in nature, but in 1942, British intelligence reported that new biological weapons had been found in Germany. Winston Churchill decided that it was time to develop an offensive weapon. He instructed Porton Down to create an anthrax bomb, but first they had to figure out where to test it. The Island of Death. Grenade Island is located in Grenade Bay. It is less than a mile off the coast of Scotland. It has always been sparsely populated. In 1881, an official census determined that 6 people were living on the island. By 1920, the population had dropped to 0. When Winston Churchill instructed the scientists at Porton Down to create an anthrax bomb, the first problem they had to solve was where to test it. The disease would kill any livestock it encountered, and humans were just as likely to die as their animals. Furthermore, once anthrax was released, it would lie dormant in the soil and render the area uninhabitable for decades. Since the scientists didn't want to kill citizens of the United Kingdom indiscriminately, they decided that Grenade Island would be the perfect place to test a biological weapon. The scientists filmed the first set of experiments. A team of 50 men traveled to the island, taking 80 sheep with them. The sheep were placed into containers, which were then arranged facing the anthrax weapon. When the weapon was detonated, a cloud of white dust was released into the air. Within several days, the sheep became infected with anthrax and died. The scientists from Porton Down were satisfied that their experiment was a success, but now they had to worry about the fact that an entire island was infected with a deadly contagious disease. First, they had to dispose of the sheep carcasses. Some of them were incinerated. Others were buried beneath rubble when explosives were used to destroy a cliff. The government then paid compensation to citizens for the dead livestock. Instead of telling the owners that their animals were part of a weapons program, officials used a different story. They said that a Greek ship was careless in disposing of its animals and allowed disease to spread. Next, 2 men were sent to set the island on fire. As the sun went down, locals on the mainland could see flames rising into the sky as plant life on the island was incinerated. After the fire burned itself out, scientists returned to Grenade Island and checked the soil. Unfortunately, anthrax is very hard to destroy. The soil was still contaminated with infectious spores. Grenade Island was still a death trap. Scientists left the island, planning to never return. Although the island was uninhabited, it was privately owned. In 1945, the owner asked the government to return his property. In 1946, British officials had to admit that it was too dangerous to return to civilian hands. The government agreed to take responsibility for the island. The anthrax bomb was never used again. It seemed that the story of the contaminated island might be over, but 40 years later it would become a problem yet again. Dark Harvest. On October 10, 1981, the Glasgow Herald newspaper received a letter. It was titled Operation Dark Harvest and contained a manifesto. The group behind it threatened to spread anthrax harvested from Grenade Island unless the government cleaned up its mess. Part of the letter said, "It is not our intention to discuss the criminal stupidity of testing biological warfare weapons on an island less than a kilometer offshore and surrounded on 3 sides by inhabited mainland. However, it is our intention to discuss the criminal stupidity of ignoring that problem that is growing decidedly worse rather than decidedly better." The next several paragraphs explained that it was only a matter of time until locals or tourists became infected with anthrax. The Dark Harvest Commandos were going to force the government to fix the problem. Their plan was explained later in the letter. In 1941, the government of the day took our island away. We want it back properly laundered. to this end and working on the principle that nothing gets done until someone does something, a team of microbiologists from 2 universities, guided by members of our local population, effected a landing on the island last week. A large number of soil samples from all over the island with a total weight of 300 pounds were securely bagged and removed to the mainland. All necessary precautions were taken. Over the next 12-month period, these bags will be deposited at appropriate points that will ensure the rapid loss of indifference from the government. On October 15th, a bucket of soil was found at Porton Down. When it was tested, scientists discovered that it was indeed contaminated with anthrax. The threats from Dark Harvest commandos had become a reality. 4 days later, more soil was discovered. This time it was left at Blackpool Tower. The attackers appeared to be targeting the Conservative Party. The soil was tested, but this time it did not contain anthrax. Police began trying to find the people responsible for the soil attacks. They suspected that locals who lived near the island might be behind the movement. Despite questioning Scottish nationalists and anti-nuclear activists, the police were never able to find the culprits. On December 7, 1981, the Dark Harvest Commandos pinned another letter to the door of the government's headquarters in Edinburgh. The letter said that they were done, for now. Taking responsibility. The attacks stopped, but the Dark Harvest Commandos had achieved their goal. The public became aware of the contaminated island and demanded action. The government was forced to find a way to clean up the mess. First, a group of scientists were given vaccines for anthrax. It was hoped it would protect them if they were exposed while cleaning the island. The scientists were also given protective clothing to wear. By 1986, the effort to restore the island to its natural state was finally underway. A solution of formaldehyde and seawater was sprayed over the entire surface of the island. Then the most contaminated sections of topsoil were removed and shipped elsewhere. Finally, a flock of sheep were left behind to test whether the efforts to remove anthrax were successful. None of the sheep died. On April 24, 1990, after being quarantined for 48 years, Grenade Island was declared safe. On May 1st, it was sold to the heirs of the original owner. The island has remained uninhabited since being declared free of anthrax, but those who live nearby are not convinced it's safe. Recent events have helped ignite new concern about the safety of people living nearby. On the evening of March 26, 2022, residents on the mainland could see flames on Grenade Island. Nobody knew how the fire started, but they could also smell the smoke from the fire blowing over them. One woman described the scene. "We could hear birds crying, screaming, and then suddenly there was silence, but the flames went on. It was awful. Everything on the island was burned to ashes. Residents on the mainland could still smell smoke the next day. So far, nobody has developed anthrax due to Grenade Island, but if it's still lurking in the soil, then it may simply be a matter of time before someone is infected." What do you think about the United Kingdom's attempt to create a biological weapon? Was it complete insanity, or is it understandable why they needed to do it? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story for some reason, then please hit the like button. Watch another video if you want to help us out, and if you didn't like this episode, then find someone you hate and tell them to watch our channel. Either way, we win. Thank you for watching Bad Things in History.